Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Washington on the eve of Election Day. Two candidates, competing visions, and the race to the White House down to the wire. We speak to the supporters hearing Donald Trump's dark message over the death penalty, migrants and crime as he tries to get out every vote. While Kamala Harris's campaign is hoping women will carry her to victory, encouraged by the country's most famous singer and protecting reproductive rights. The election, though, is already over for more than 76 million people after a record number of early votes cast.
Also on Sky News at 10 tonight, we see the detritus and devastation on the streets of Spain as two more Britons are confirmed among the victims of the floods. Why Sir Keir Starmer's government has admitted the sums over university tuition don't add up, increasing student fees for the first time in nearly a decade.
This is where the movie gets its mojo, baby.
Groovy, yes.
The man behind the sound of so many hits, perhaps music's greatest ever producer, Quincy Jones, has died. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight.
Well, hello, good evening. If you want to know where tomorrow's US election may well be decided, consider this. Tonight, in a country which spans a continent, the two contenders are campaigning just 40 miles apart. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are both appealing to voters in Pennsylvania, the key swing state. Well, the polling numbers in these final hours are eye-wateringly close. According to Sky's average of the most recent polling, Kamala Harris is leading Donald Trump, but by a meager 1.3 percentage points. The race, though, isn't decided on the overall vote. It's on the result in each state, and 7 battlegrounds hold the key. The latest polling suggests that Harris is ahead in Nevada, while Trump leads in Arizona. Harris is leading in the upper Midwestern states of Wisconsin and Michigan. Down south, Donald Trump is projected to win North Carolina and Georgia. And in Pennsylvania, the race appears very tight, with Kamala Harris in a narrow lead. Our first report comes from our US correspondent, Martha Kellner, following the Harris campaign.
Kamala Harris touching down, her support perhaps accelerating in the last hours.
Kamala! Kamala!
The focus here in Pennsylvania.
Kamala! Kamala!
And on them, the women she believes can carry her over the line. Polls showing surprise backing for the vice president among independent and older women.
I'm a Republican. I am voting for Kamala because she stands for everything right, truth, justice, and I'm just so sick of the hatred.
They really do think that democracy is at a brink, and that would be devastating. And I'm also for women's rights.
Do you think that women are the key to this election, turning out women?
I certainly hope so, but I also hope it's men who also realize that the government really should not play a part in our decision about abortion.
A last push brought a new plan, Harris pointedly refusing to say even the name of Donald Trump.
There's a huge difference between me and the other guy, which everybody here knows, which is why you are here to help us get out the vote.
Harris is blitzing Pennsylvania in a last effort to drive these people to the ballot box on a day when she's drenching her campaign with celebrity.
In Philadelphia, they were preparing for her final bow. Harris will appear here tonight with Lady Gaga and Oprah Winfrey. Rumours persist that Taylor Swift may show up too. At this Swift-themed brunch in a Republican heartland in Pennsylvania, some apathetic voters are still winnable.
She's just a good person, so uneducated people like me will probably go register to vote just based off of what she said.
You trust her more than you trust politicians?
Absolutely. If it's up to me, I'm not voting for anyone, but if it's up to Taylor, I may go vote for Kamala.
There are those she will never persuade, but the key, her team believes, is turning out everyone they can.
Take a look, hats, t-shirts, buttons.
Harris, they say, is no longer the underdog. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Well, for Donald Trump's voice at least, the election campaign may be coming to a timely end. Sounding hoarse at times, he spoke to supporters and told them he was leading in every swing state. Our US correspondent, James Matthews, reports now from Pennsylvania.
This was Reading, Pennsylvania, and these were Donald Trump supporters. We are approaching Journey's End. For their political performer, this was a curtain call.
In one word, what's the single most important issue for you in this election?
The border, safety.
Freedom.
Immigration. Life.
The economy.
Freedom.
Business.
They are the movement that Trump built. Here, they came to watch a last day's rally. We might never see it again. A swing through the swing states took him first to rally in North Carolina.
With North Carolina, I always got there because we won every race, every primary. So essentially, you know, they have an expression, I hate the expression actually, but it's ours to lose. Does that make sense to you? It's ours to lose. If we get everybody out and vote, there's not a thing they can do. So here's my only purpose in even being here today. Get out and vote, you know that.
Donald Trump is in contention at the end of a tumultuous campaign.
Take over, Elijah. I love salt. Wait a minute, I spilled some.
Floating island of garbage. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
We're leading in every state.
And I won't forget the men who died
This doesn't have the celebrity of the Harris campaign. It's an effort built around its central character. A central demographic is the young male voter.
We've been left behind. yeah. We've been kicked down, as Oliver Anthony put it, and they're kicking us while we're down.
Yeah. I just think he's passionate, he is strategic, and he knows what is right for the people.
Women do tend to vote more on emotion and feelings instead of logic and policies. So I tend to think that the Democrats play really, really well to that tendency.
Scholarships and job opportunities, so much less if you're white and Christian, because they will turn you down because of your skin color.
The Donald Trump phenomenon has created this, a movement that's propelled him to the verge of a second presidential term. One day before the election, this is how US political history looks. How it looks after Tuesday is the big uncertainty. Win or lose. James Matthews, Sky News, in Reading, Pennsylvania.
Well, let's speak now to James in Reading, Pennsylvania, and also to Martha Kellner, just 40 miles across the state in Allentown. James, on this final day then, what is the primary message that Donald Trump is sending to his voters?
Hi, Anna. Yeah, well, he's just off his feet here in Reading, Pennsylvania. We had some of the greatest hits. Donald Trump taking aim at his opponents, saying that Nancy Pelosi, former Democrat Speaker of the House, was involved in insider trading, offering no evidence on that. Taking aim at immigrants, saying that they were overwhelming hospitals and schools. So some of the familiar themes, certainly, but the central message of today concerns getting the vote out. You heard him in my report there. He's keen that those who back him, that those who have him neck and neck in the polls actually turn out and cast their vote. We're on the 2-yard line, he said. He clearly thinks he's close to victory. But the thing about American politics is that it is polarized. They are entrenched, both sides, on both sides of the political spectrum. In the middle, there are relatively few persuadable voters. So those numbers who are already locked in, the key is getting that vote out. That's why Donald Trump is hitting it hard, hitting that message hard today in the swing states. He's been in North Carolina right now. He's been in Pennsylvania. He moves on to close tonight in Grand Rapids in Michigan, similar to his routine in the last 2 elections in 2016 and 2020.
Yes, get out the vote, such a big part of these final hours. And Martha, much talk today about whether women, especially older white women, may make the difference for Kamala Harris in this tightest of races.
Yeah, there was a poll out this week, Anna. People may have seen it. It certainly caused a huge stir here. It was from the state of Iowa, and it in fact showed Kamala Harris up in that ruby red state. It may well turn out to be an outlier of a poll, but there were certainly some very encouraging trends for Team Harris in that poll, particularly around independent and older women voters going for her over Donald Trump. And this is purely anecdotal, but over the past few days here in Pennsylvania, speaking to independent and Republican women, a fair number of them have told me that they're going to switch their vote from Donald Trump to Kamala Harris because of what they say is his divisive and dangerous rhetoric, in their words, but also because of reproductive rights. This is the first presidential election since the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which gave women the constitutional right to choose. And that debate around abortion shouldn't be underestimated as a motivating factor when people go to the ballot box. I was at an event earlier on today with the actor Julia Louis-Dreyfus, the star of Veep, and she was mentioning the names of 3 women who have died in the United States since the overturning of Roe versus Wade because of delayed or denied abortion care. It's something women here are furious about, and particularly based on who I've been speaking to, older women. They simply can't believe they're living in a time where their daughters and granddaughters have fewer rights around their own bodies than they did.
Martha and James, thanks to both of you in Pennsylvania. Well, we've heard tonight about two key groups who the campaigns think might swing this election: white women and young men. A third way of cutting American society is through the prism of ethnicity, and the battle for Latino voters has been particularly fierce. There is evidence that more may vote Republican this time than at previous elections, and our correspondent Shingi Marurike saw the potential impact in the battleground state of Arizona.
The sprawling, scenic state of Arizona is one of the places that will decide America's destiny. Above the city of Phoenix, Dobbins Lookout is where Richie proposed to Jennifer. In tomorrow's election, her vote will be based on the economy.
I'm voting for Donald Trump. I want everything to be more affordable. Prices have gone up like crazy, and especially now that I'm wanting to get married and have kids, I definitely want to be able to go to McDonald's and afford like a hot and spicy for $1 like they used to be.
Like many in Arizona, the couple's heritage is Mexican. This is the only swing state on the border where the debate around immigration is complex.
A lot of Hispanic community was very inclined to the Democrat, but I believe that immigration status doesn't really matter to me much anymore. You know, it used to matter to my parents, but my parents are citizens. That factor doesn't really play a factor in my life anymore.
Downtown, some people have already made their choice, casting their ballots at a drive-through polling station. Those include Renee Rojas. She is a lifelong Republican, swinging the other way for the first time. Her reason? Donald Trump.
He talks about women as if we're just objects, we're not people, we're just supposed to be just seen, not heard. That's not me, and that's not most women in America.
Even if she's not voting Trump, Renee still represents the state's old-school conservatism.
I'm an Arizonan. I have guns myself. I have several different kind of firearms, heavy machine guns and handguns, so I am a proud gun holder.
For other people voting here like Peter, it's a simple decision.
The reason why I voted for Kamala is that we can't politically make any big changes, especially on an international scale, you know, because if we get somebody else president other than what the existing presidency, there could be World War III.
Phoenix and the nearby city of Scottsdale sit in Maricopa County, where 6 in 10 of Arizona's voters are.
How you guys doing? How's it going? Pretty good, pretty good. Conservative voter guides?
Young Republicans like Dane know this, and it's why they're doing their best to grab people's attention in any way they can.
There was a movement, Swifties for Trump, because Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris. Someone like that, who has a private jet and is flying around the country, for you to sit there on your high horse with billions of dollars and tell people what you think should happen when you're already set for life. Prices of everything in this country have skyrocketed since Biden took over. And his BFF, Kamala, is going to take over and just continue those price hikes.
But it's Biden who won here last time, by less than 11,000 votes. Arizona was once a reliably Republican state, but in 2020, that changed. A shift driven by an evolving demographic in one of the country's fastest growing populations. The ways people vote are complicated, rooted in not just who they are, but where they're from. With some places, crucial landmarks on the route to victory. Shingi Marurike, Sky News, Arizona.
Well, from Arizona, let's cross to another battleground state, Michigan, and our correspondent there, Yusra El-Bahir. Yusra, it is traditionally Democrat, but Kamala Harris certainly has moved to try to address what for her could be a weakness.
She has indeed, Anna. We saw her in one of her last rallies here in Michigan speak to a crowd and tell them at the very top of her address that she's going to unequivocally end the war in Gaza. People were cheering, but she was also heckled because it has been a long time coming, and the people we've spoken to here have said it's just too little, too late. Arab Americans here in Dearborn, the first Arab majority city in the U.S., have been very upset by how the Biden-Harris administration has handled the war in Gaza and now in Lebanon. And Arab American leaders have been said to hold kind of closed meetings with Harris, but they haven't been able to publicly endorse her. And one of the few that did endorse her publicly was shamed. We did speak to a longtime Democrat who ran for Senate here in Michigan, and this is what he told us.
To this day, I have not decided who I'm voting for, but I know I'm not voting for Harris.
Really?
Yes.
As a longtime Democrat?
As a longtime Democrat.
So
I will not support an administration that commits genocide. And to me, the only way to stop this in the future is to make sure we punish those who perpetrate the genocide in Gaza. And that is to defeat the Biden-Harris administration.
What's also been shocking is hearing from people here that they are planning to vote for Trump, and someone who's actually already voted for Trump, a young Lebanese-American student, the same man who put a travel ban on Muslims when he first came into his own presidency back in 2016. It just goes to show just how charged this election is, just how close this is, and what it means to millions of people across Michigan.
Yusra, live for us there in Michigan. Thank you. Well, we will, of course, have live coverage of the US election on Sky News. Here is a flavour of what's in store from my colleagues Yalda Hakim and Mark Austin.
It's the final countdown. The wait is almost over.
Americans have been casting their votes on who they want to be the next president of the United States.
We'll bring you all the action as it unfolds in every state.
So join us tomorrow for America Votes Election Night live on Sky News from 10 p.m.
Yes, Yalda and Mark taking you through those results in great detail. I'll be back a little later in Sky News at 10. Now let's head to Jonathan for the rest of the day's news. Jonathan.
Anna, thank you very much. A firefighter in one of the towns worst affected by Spain's deadly floods told us today how local people called him during the deluge, pleading for help and saying they were going to die. The authorities are still searching for victims. The current known number of dead is 217. Two of those people were identified today as a British couple, Don and Terry Turner. Our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, reports from the town of Algemesi near Valencia.
In Algemesi, the damage is ferocious. The firefighters have asked us to join their patrol. They want the world to see what they're up against.
This day, too much.
Sam is a local, a lifetime in the fire service. He was on duty on the night of the flood.
It's very crazy. The people call by phone crying. I go to die, I go to die, I go to die. Help us, please help us. Was very traumatic.
We see charities handing out food and water to those in need. People here still lack the necessities of life nearly a week after the floods. There's rubbish and mud piled up by the road. Sam can barely squeeze the car through. Like his colleagues, he's in shock. We stop by the entrance to an underground car park. It smells foul and it's dark and ominous.
It's very dangerous, and this is all of the cars under the water, and all of this car is broken.
I guess we do not know if there are any people in these cars, because you cannot see.
It's a possible that we found some people die in his car. Están trayendo refuerzos y los envían a zona 3.
Sam offers solace to his neighbours, but he worries that all this could happen again. At the Bonaire shopping centre near Valencia, a vastly bigger underground car park is still being pumped out. Nobody knows how many people were caught here when the floodwater came. Spain is bracing itself for many more victims. We now know that 2 more British people died in this disaster, Don and Terry Turner. They were trapped in their car.
There was no alert. My parents would not have been out with that alert. We are so angry at the slackness of the Spanish authorities in that respect.
Barcelona, the latest city left to cope with a deluge of ferocious torrential rain. This whole country is on edge, looking to the skies and hoping for an end to its torment. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Algemesi in Spain.
Sir Keir Starmer ran for Labour leader, promising to scrap university tuition fees. Today, 4 years on, the new Prime Minister's government instead announced they will rise for the first time in 8 years. Our political correspondent Rob Powell is at the Department for Education tonight. And Rob, another uncomfortable decision. Why is the government saying it needs to do this?
Well, they're saying this rise is needed to put universities on a firmer and more stable financial footing. Now, unis have been going through financial distress for a while now. It's been a combination of overseas students that pay higher fee levels, simply not applying, not coming to UK universities, but also the recent rapid rate of prices going up. Throughout all of that, tuition fees have stayed frozen. They've stayed frozen since 2017. That will change in April. We'll get a rise of £285, taking fees to just over £9,500 a year. Now, universities have welcomed this, saying it's the right thing to do. Students and those that represent them have said that it could put people off going to universities. So today, the Education Secretary was trying to reassure people that this won't have an immediate impact on the actual amount that they repay from their student loan debt.
I understand some students may worry about the impact this increase will have on their loan debt. So I want to reassure students already at university, when you start repaying your loan, you will not see higher monthly repayments as a result of these changes to fee and maintenance loans. That's because student loans are not like consumer loans. Monthly repayments depend on earnings, not simply the amount borrowed or interest rates. And at the end of any loan term, any outstanding loan balance, including interest built up, will be written off.
Now, ahead of this, there had been some speculation that the non-repayable maintenance grants that were axed in 2016, that they could be brought back for some poorer students. That hasn't materialised. You do get a sense that some here might like to see that, though. Instead, maintenance loans will be increased, but those, of course, are repayable. I think to an extent this is a little bit awkward for the government, though. As you say, Sir Keir Starmer 4 years ago said he wanted to abolish tuition fees, something he rapidly reversed on when he became leader. But just last summer, the Education Secretary, or the Shadow Education Secretary at the time, was writing pieces in the newspapers talking about how she wants Labour to lower the costs for graduates. This could just be the start, though. This rise is only for the coming academic year. It's not necessarily at the moment going to be replicated in further years. It's hard to see how that's sustainable in the long term, though, so we may well be looking at further reforms, and indeed the Department for Education say they will have further details of what they want to change in the sector in the coming months.
Rob, thank you. The former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is returning to the parliamentary front line. Sky News understands that she will be the Shadow Foreign Secretary in Kemi Badenoch's new team. The Conservative leader, elected at the weekend, has made the man she defeated, Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary. Another defeated rival, Mel Stride, becomes Shadow Chancellor. Sir Keir Starmer says the government will treat people smugglers like terrorists, claiming illegal migration is a massive driver of global insecurity. He announced a further £75 million for border security at the start of a week-long campaign on small boat crossings. And 2 more cases of Mpox have been detected in the UK. The Health Security Agency said they were detected in household contacts with the first case, which was discovered last week. The agency says the 2 people are being treated in hospital in London and that the risk to the UK population remains low. Human rights campaigners have demanded the release of a woman arrested in Iran after she removed her clothes, apparently in protest against the country's strict Islamic dress code. Videos posted to social media appear to show the woman walking out onto the street in her underwear at the Islamic Azad University in Tehran. Sky's Amelia Harper reports.
From behind a window, onlookers watch as a young woman sits in her underwear. The woman raises her arm, appearing to reason with the man and woman stood beside her. Named as Ahu Dariai, the footage appears to show the university student in an act of defiance against Iran's strict Islamic dress code. The circumstances remain unclear, but outside a university in Tehran, a crowd watches on. And as she walks on the far side of the road, she removes her underwear. University officials claim it's because she's mentally ill. But people who know her tell Sky News this is false. They've got her, onlookers say. In this video, it appears a person is put into a car before being driven away. Human rights organisation Amnesty International reports the woman was violently arrested.
She is in danger, definitely. She can be imprisoned, and I fully support what Amnesty International says, that she needs to be released immediately without any condition.
There are questions now for her safety as Iran's morality police continue to enforce strict religious rules. It's after Kurdish Iranian woman Mahsa Amini died in police custody in 2022. She reportedly wasn't abiding by compulsory veiling laws. The backlash public, with women setting fire to their hijabs in the biggest protest the regime has ever faced. For acts like these in Iran, what fate Ahu Daryai faces is unknown. A severe breach of the country's rules could prompt a similar level of punishment. Amelia Harper, Sky News.
He was an absolute hero and a legend. Some of the musicians who followed in the footsteps of Quincy Jones told us today. The man, the producer, who perhaps made more great music than anyone else, has died at the age of 91. He collaborated with Michael Jackson, Frank Sinatra, and saw his work celebrated in the film Austin Powers. Our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer looks back on his life.
He is the man who defined the sound of a musical icon. A producer across all of the singer's biggest albums. Without Quincy Jones, we wouldn't have music like this. Few might have been across the full extent of his musical reach, but the Oscar-winning composer and pioneering black music executive was one of America's most versatile cultural figures.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Quincy Jones!
Writing this number, which was in the film Austin Powers, in 20 minutes in the 60s.
Fly me to the moon.
Reworking Fly Me to the Moon from a waltz to swing for Frank Sinatra.
I feel like the most blessed person on the planet to have come along the path that I came to musically.
It's my party and I cry if I want to.
This, his first US #1, worlds away from his jazz roots and as a big band arranger for Ray Charles. His contact book so vast, a security guard carried his 19 mobile phones. At the Music Industry's Trusts Award, memories of why his musical approval mattered.
What an absolute hero, somebody that I'd have loved to have met. He created pop music for me.
I did meet him at a couple of events and I feel so privileged.
I think he just made so many great records that, you know, so many people in the world love and still today, and yeah, what an absolute legend.
That respect meant he could get away with saying more than most. Elvis, he claimed, was a racist. The Beatles, he said, were the worst musicians in the world. Wrangling egos during the charity recording of We Are the World, he reportedly told Michael Jackson to just do what you're told.
On days like these.
A polymath producer, Quincy Jones's fingerprints across some of the greatest pop music of all time. Katie Spencer, Sky News. Well, that is it from us this evening in Washington, with just hours to go until the polls open, and it is close. 160 million people are expected to vote. 76 million have already done so. For those planning on heading to the polls tomorrow, the choice is between a second Trump presidency or Kamala Harris, the vice president who would be America's first female president. It is not just the president, though, that people are voting for. Also on the ballot, the fight for power in the building behind me, and for some, that critical issue of the right to an abortion. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have both been in Pennsylvania today. The former president heads to Michigan later to continue his campaign. And tonight, a star-studded finale for Kamala Harris in Pennsylvania. And in those states, it will come down to a few suburbs and a few counties. Thousands
rather than millions of people, will dictate who will be the next president of the United States. We will have, of course, live coverage of the US election here on Sky News. That is tomorrow, Tuesday, the 5th of November, throughout the day and night.
Anna, thank you very much. And that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we're going to take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, I'm joined by Brian Closs, a political scientist at University College London, and The Spectator's economics editor, Kate Andrews. Evening to both of you. We will chat shortly. Among the stories we're going to be discussing, this on the front of the Financial Times. Its headline, America votes as polls show dead heat. We'll be back after this short break.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win. Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. It's our first look at what is on the front of tomorrow's papers. But first, our top stories. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have been campaigning hard in crucial states, which could affect the outcome of tomorrow's US election. A British couple, Terry and Don Turner, are confirmed to be among more than 200 people who died in last week's floods in Valencia. And tuition fees are going up next year in England, the first increase for 8 years. Very good evening. Time then for the press preview. It's our first look at what is on the front pages of tomorrow's papers. We're going to see what's making the headlines tonight with Brian Closs, a political scientist at University College London, and the Spectator's economics editor, Kate Andrews. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. Evening to both of you. We'll chat in a moment after we've had a look at those front pages, starting with the US election, of course. And as the hours tick away to the big vote, the Financial Times has this headline: America votes as polls show dead heat. Same lead story for the Eye: America decides as the world holds its breath. Here's The Guardian putting it starkly: the US is facing its moment of reckoning. But with fears growing of what Donald Trump and his supporters might do if he loses, The Telegraph quotes Trump supporter and Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, telling him he has to accept the result and not fight it. Sir Keir Starmer's 180-degree uni U-turn is how the Metro reports the government's decision to raise university tuition fees by over 3%, 2 years after the Prime Minister pledged to abolish them altogether. Well, the Mail is scathing. Now that's what you call a U-turn, it says. The Star seizes on that story as well. Their headline: Return of the Clowns, and suggesting that this government is just as bad as the last one. Tomorrow's Times, however, says Labour is also promising that universities will improve in return for the increase. And on the subject of U-turns, the Express leads with calls to reverse the controversial budget move to charge farmers inheritance tax. And finally, The Sun reveals that the Gallagher brothers won't get paid for their Oasis reunion gigs until the tour starts, just in case they fall out and don't turn up, which seems sensible. And a reminder that you can scan the QR code you see on screen during the programme. Check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us discussing them. And to do that, I'm joined tonight by Brian Closs and Kate Andrews. Lovely to see you both on the eve of what is going to be a momentous election. And the front of the Financial Times puts it very well, doesn't it? America votes as polls show dead heat. How are we both feeling? Kate, why don't you kick things off?
How are we feeling? America campaigns for about 2 years at a time. So a lot of voters will be feeling relieved as they reach Election Day. Many other voters will be anxious. They'll be desperate for their candidate to win. I'm quite excited. There's nothing like a U.S. election. I was in Pennsylvania a couple weekends ago. I went to a Trump rally to report on it for The Spectator magazine. And while there are quite rightly reports of Washington, D.C. being boarded up, threats of violence, deep concerns about the ways that protests may escalate, we wouldn't suggest otherwise. It did feel like democracy was alive and well in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. There were Trump supporters queuing around the blocks, and there were Harris protesters, and it was friendly, and people were waving their flags, and people were laughing and joking with each other. Ultimately, I believe America can get through this election. I believe that it will come out on the other side, a strong nation as it is. It is very tense, and as the FT points out, truly a dead heat when it comes to the polls, and even the betting markets are tightening.
Yes, interesting that, isn't it? And we'll talk perhaps about repercussions after the election in a moment. Brian, Kate was in Pennsylvania 2 weeks ago, and all eyes are still on Pennsylvania.
Yes, it's one of the key swing states. There's about 7 key swing states that we don't know how they're going to turn out. And there could be others because there have been shifts in the electorate since the pandemic. There are shifts because of abortion politics. This is the first presidential election after that monumental Supreme Court decision. And as a result of that, nobody knows what's going to happen in the election tomorrow. It's an extremely pivotal moment for the U.S., but it's also an extremely pivotal moment for the world. And the other aspect of this that's worth highlighting is no matter what, we're going to make history tomorrow because we're either going to elect the first woman as president or the first convicted felon as president. And that is the nature of this election. It's a historic one, no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, The Guardian front page, very similar, really. Harris or Trump, US faces its moment of reckoning. And it could come down, couldn't it, to the votes of 100,000 people. I mean, we're not talking just about one state or even a county within a state, but even sub-counties within that state.
It could be fewer. If we go back to 2016, Donald Trump won the election across 3 states with about 80,000 votes. It was so at the margin. And I think there's a sense, in retrospect, certainly, that if Hillary Clinton has spent a bit more time campaigning in those states, it very well could have been a different outcome. If you break down where Trump and Harris have been since autumn, they have been hitting the campaign trail, both of them, every day in these crucial swing states. Neither of them seems to be taking these states for granted, which is a pretty big difference from where we were in 2016, and perhaps the reason that the polls are so tight. But as Brian says, anything can happen. That is part of the excitement. Back in 2016, Ohio and Florida were swing states. They were crucial swing states. These are now comfortably in the Republican camp. So the idea that we could discover tomorrow evening that a state that wasn't thought to be in play is all of a sudden, even if it doesn't flip, certainly in play, will dictate where American politics goes, not just in this campaign, but for the years to come.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that no one knows what the electorate is going to look like. I mean, we have an extremely high early turnout. We also, as I said before, have the first presidential election after this Dobbs Supreme Court ruling, which overturned Roe v. Wade and sent it back to the states. And as a result of that, the question that the polls are trying to ask, and may have answered correctly, may have answered incorrectly, is who is actually going to show up on Tuesday? Who's going to actually cast their ballot? And no one knows. And so there's a huge gender gap in this election. It's clear that Harris is winning women by a very large margin, possibly by the widest margin in history. We'll see how those shake out. But it's going to be crucial to figure out, are the polls not just getting the surveys correct, but are they modeling the electorate? Because that's also what the polls are trying to do. They're trying to figure out, of the people who are going to vote, who's voting for Trump and who's voting for Harris. And that's the X factor, is who's going to actually show up.
We know what the big issues are. We know the economy is playing heavily on voters' minds, immigration as well. And Donald Trump has talked a huge amount about that, hasn't he? But on the front of the eye, they also talk about the world holding its breath, making the point that from Moscow and Kyiv to Beijing and Tehran, global leaders wait to discover the future of the US. You touched on this a moment ago. Kate, how important do you think that is as a factor for voters and indeed for the rest of us as we all look towards the White House?
It is a factor for American voters. It is certainly what everybody in the UK and other parts of the West are going to be thinking about, because America really does lead on this, particularly when it comes to the war in Ukraine. What happens tomorrow night could be the difference between whether or not the UK is going at this with America or whether or not it's going at it alone. That's certainly the case. For American voters, it is not the number one issue. Donald Trump is pushing the economy and inflation for a reason, because voters have said for about 3.5 years now, almost since the Biden administration began, that that is their number one issue. Harris is understandably pushing on abortion. She's trying to turn out the female vote. And that message does seem to be resonating, interestingly, not just with younger women, but with older women as well, who will have lived through a history where these options were not as accessible to them. The foreign policy issue is interesting because Harris does come across as the more interventionist candidate. She's been campaigning with people like Liz Cheney. There's certainly a big part of the electorate that will still like that position. But these things have been changing, and Donald Trump pushing the fact that he didn't start war when he was in the Oval Office is also very compelling with voters. That has been a big shift since the early 2000s, and one that could, I think, play slightly in Trump's favor.
And it's been a good policy of Trump, hasn't it, to bring out that old Reagan question, you know, do you feel better off today than you did 4 years ago? And, of course, the resounding answer at all the rallies that he said it has been a big no.
It's quite unusual, because 4 years ago was the pandemic lockdowns, and no one really has a positive memory of that. So it's an odd choice to my mind, but it's one that apparently is resonating with his base anyway.
Yeah. Let's look at the front of the Telegraph as well, because they've got quite an interesting angle. Farage apparently is going to be the only British representative in Mar-a-Lago as the results come in. But he's told Trump, do not fight the poll result. What's going to happen in the days following this election result? If he doesn't win, what happens next?
I think it's quite obvious that it's highly likely that Trump will reject the results and claim voter fraud, as he did in 2020, which was baseless then and will be baseless this time as well. I don't think that Nigel Farage is going to influence Trump's decision-making on this. I think there's been a long strategy in laying the groundwork for this, and it has worked. I mean, a significant number of Republicans believe, falsely, that Donald Trump somehow secretly won the 2020 election that was stolen from him. Again, it was baseless, it's not true, but they believe that. And so the risk, I think, is that between the election and the inauguration, and this is, I think, possible regardless of the result tomorrow, I think that there is an increasing risk around elections in the United States that violence will take place. And it is a largely dysfunctional democracy in many ways around things like violence, because violence does not need 50% of the population to be on board with it. It needs a small number of people to be on board with it, and those people are galvanized. And so, all it takes is that person to sort of light that initial spark. And Donald Trump is very, very keen, I think, to light the spark if he loses. So I expect that Harris will accept the results if she loses. I'm sure there will be plenty of Democrats who harumph about it, but I think that ultimately they will certify the results. Whether that happens if Trump loses, I wouldn't be as confident.
Okay, we need to go to the break, but just a very quick thought on this from you, Kate.
Donald Trump is already using language to suggest that if he loses, there was foul play. It is incredibly worrying. I do wonder if he would be able to have the same influence he'd like to have, because he isn't currently president.
OK, plenty more to discuss over the next hour or so. Do stay with us. Thank you very much. Coming up after the break, Conservative leadership rivals Robert Jenrick and Priti Patel join new leader Kemi Badenoch on the front bench, discussing that and more next.
Are you ready to make your voices heard?
As America votes,
Win, 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 win.
Get ready for an election night like no other.
join our team stateside
as we get close to the action
and bring you the results as they arrive.
with full reaction and comprehensive analysis guiding you through the night.
In an election which could have huge consequences around the world.
America Votes, Election Night Live.
Get the full story first on Sky News.
Prime Minister Modi is the most popular politician in the country. He is expected to win his third term in these elections.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party, a promise fulfilled. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
He paid over $50,000 to traffickers to get him to America. Instead, he was kidnapped, tied up, and threatened by smugglers. A commando from the state force walks me through to a Mai Tai village on the front line.
Firing the civilian and they're burning our house.
We cross to the opposite side, held by the cookies.
When they fire, we have to retaliate.
Sky News, get the full story first. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration.
The enthusiasm is palpable. The young desire change.
These elections are a pivotal moment for the country's economic and political history. The concern here is that the public healthcare system is inadequate.
In a prayer, she's asking God to help understand what happened. I cannot carry on. God, help me. He says his world has crashed. Like him, there are scores of families searching for their loved ones.
Too often have families endured such tragedies for the negligence not only by the administration, but also by spiritual people in this country. Free wherever you get your news. Even though it has few seats in Parliament, Kashmir is symbolic and very significant. It's often been called a nuclear flashpoint.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page
and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Hello again, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me in the studio, Brian Closs, political scientist at University College London, and the Spectator's economics editor, Kate Andrews. Let's get straight into it. Kate, front of The Guardian, Jenrick and Patel join Badenoch's front bench. Robert Jenrick and Shadow Justice Secretary, Mel Stride in there as well, Shadow Chancellor, Priti Patel, Shadow Foreign Secretary. Not all fully confirmed yet, but it's certainly what we understand. Is this about unity, bringing the party together, showing that we can all work as one happy family?
It's supposed to be putting the Tory chaos in the past and bringing leadership contenders together into one shadow government. What's interesting here is that Momentum is back. Mel Stride's been given Shadow Chancellor, and that is a very senior position to be going up against Rachel Reeves. There are some questions about Robert Jenrick becoming the Shadow Justice Secretary. As we were going on air, I'm not sure that's actually been fully confirmed yet. But if it is, that will be very interesting as to whether or not he sticks to his position on leaving the ECHR, something he would be talking about in that role, and the area perhaps where Badenoch and Jenrick were contrasting most in that leadership election.
OK, we're going to rattle through these, if that's OK. Front page of The Times, Brian, Labour vowed to improve universities as fees rise. The first time in quite a few years that actually fees have gone up. It's going to cost students a little bit more. You have been an admissions tutor, I understand, in the past. I mean, do you think this is understandable? We know that universities keep telling us they're struggling.
Yeah, I mean, the costs of everything has gone up over the last 8 years, and the universities have had frozen tuition fees. Obviously, you know, a lot of people are struggling to pay them as it is, so it's bad news for those families. But, you know, it's about trade-offs when you govern. And I think one of the trade-offs that the university sector has had to make, and this is sort of the open secret in the university sector, is that the way they've dealt with the frozen tuition fees in the domestic students is by expanding the number of overseas students. And so this is something that's not just about the education sector, it's also about immigration, because the number of student visas has to go up to then subsidize the British students who are paying a frozen tuition rate. So all of these things are interconnected, and I think that what the government is trying to do is trying to sort of thread the needle of keeping tuition as low as possible, but also ensuring that universities don't have to shutter, don't have to do mass layoffs. And, you know, I think this is one of those areas where, like everything in the budget, it's a reflection of the least bad option.
Yeah.
And
what
that's
do you think, Kate? Fair enough, or is it hypocritical of Keir Starmer? I mean, it wasn't even in the manifesto.
Well, look, I think it's fair public policy for all the reasons that Brian just laid out. The difficulty, of course, is to go from a position not all that long ago where you would scrap tuition fees to the fact that you are now hiking tuition fees. It's going to be difficult for a lot of your supporters and a lot of your MPs to swallow. And as you say, we did not get a lot of information about just about anything in that Labour manifesto, not on tax, not on reform, there was not a lot of public policy in there. So these feel like surprises. And one has to wonder, had the government been a little more open and honest about what it planned to do, perhaps they would have won 20 fewer seats, 30 fewer seats, but they might feel like, they certainly have an electoral mandate, don't get me wrong, but this might feel like less of a surprise when it comes up now.
OK, all right, great. Thank you both very much. We shall chat again at 11 o'clock. Right now, we're going to end the hour with a look at the weather. Well, it's going to be generally mild, rather cloudy and dry this week, turning quite warm in the sunnier parts, but expect a little light rain or drizzle in places. There will be a mostly mild, mainly dry, but rather dull start tomorrow with extensive low cloud mist and fog and a little drizzle in places. The morning will be much like recent days, with many places staying rather grey and murky, but fog will lift slowly and there'll be more in the way of sunny breaks. Northern, western and southeastern parts look most favourable. Coming up next here on Sky News at 11 o'clock, the final sprint in the race to the White House. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump make their last pitches to voters before the polls open. All the details in a couple of minutes.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win. Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.